Hey everybody, it's Jim of Animated Educated, and Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome to 2022. And this year we're going to make it hopefully a really good year. We got a lot of interesting interviews coming up in the new year. So I'm pretty excited today because I'm going to have my first guest of the new year is none other than Alasdair Beckett-King. Now, you might not know who that is, but if you're on YouTube, you might have seen his YouTube channel. He's also known as ABK. So we're going to be talking to him. He not only is a stand-up comedian, but is also does some animation and visual effects and things like that. So he's got a lot of interesting skills that he uses. And yeah, we're going to be talking to him today on Animated Educated. Okay, well, I'm just going to edit all this stuff later and we'll just both sound brilliant. Usually I'm the guy that's like talking too much. Not that you're not talking too much. It's okay. Wait a minute. That just came back and hit me.
No, I forbid you from editing that out. You must leave that bit in.
Hey everybody, this is Jim Richardson of Animated Educated. Welcome to 2022. And this is my first guest. He is a stand-up comedian, a filmmaker, an artist. I'd say an artist. Visual effect artist. Yeah,
capital A artist. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's everything I do is art. This is art.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm doing it right now.
I know. It's not really hard to do sometimes, you know.
Yeah, art is surprisingly easy. Sometimes it just looks like sitting.
I saw your videos first, and I thought they're very clever and funny. And then I noticed there's one that just popped out, was the animated one, and I was like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah, and I doing VFX stuff. I took the birds out of the birds, the Hitchcock film, which is quite a fun thing to do. Although it turned out that an artist did the exact same thing several years ago.
Oh, okay.
But for the entire film. But also, I would have to add less well than I did it. It's fascinating to me that a concept as silly as taking the birds out of the birds was thought of by two people, and I'm one of them. So I still feel kind of lucky.
I'm just curious, like, how does a guy who's a stand-up comedian, because you didn't start off, I don't think, life as a stand-up comedian.
Funny babies that are like, what is the deal with follow-on milk? Like, is it milk? Is it powder? Is this on? No.
It's a rattle. It's a rattle. Hey, how you doing, everybody? Yeah.
Hey, try the mashed up applesauce. I went to, I studied film and theatre and TV and stuff at university, and I went to film school. And then as I was graduating from film school, I started doing stand-up comedy, which is way, way cheaper than making films. And so I enjoyed that a lot. I'm still doing that. And in the last few years, I started to make short videos to try and use all of that stuff, all of the government money I'd somehow conned. I'm from the United Kingdom, and in about 10 years ago, it used to be possible to get public funding for education in this country. And so I managed to con the government into paying for me to go to film school. And I thought, well, that was obviously a waste of public funds. However, I now have some skills that I could apply on the internet. It seems arrogant to describe yourself as self-taught, I think, because what that means is I watched loads of tutorials and read loads of books and just very, very slowly, frame by frame, went through animations to see how they worked. Like the song, the intro animation is a spoof of Thundercats. So I just found one of the few videos of it that's been uploaded where the frame rate hasn't been crushed into a different frame rate. So there's double frames and you can't watch it properly. And just frame by frame watched what they were doing and how it was working. So is that being self-taught? Is that being a genius? Maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Not for me to say.
London's film school, and you were there for like what, 4 or 5 years?
It's 2 years.
Really?
Although I think it took me about 3 because I wasn't very good at it. So they let me stick around and try, and then we all agreed that it had gone badly and that I should become a stand-up comedian and stop trying to mess around in the film industry. I had always wanted to do funny things, but I was afraid to try and do funny things in case it wasn't funny. And so I kept trying to do straight things that were simultaneously straight and weird, with sort of central concepts that were essentially quite funny but with no jokes. And the more sincere stuff I tried to do, the less seriously people took it. And when I tried to do sincere things, people laughed at the sincere things. And yeah, when I eventually gave up and tried to do something that was funny, it was better, I think. I wish I wish I could go back in time and suggest that I put a few jokes into those films from then.
And then this was kind of fun. It was Nettie Carlisle and Iron Hands one.
Yes.
And
Yes,
that was very interesting because you had a lot of fun kind of stuff in it, and with the hair and all the
that one did have a couple of semi jokes in it. Yeah, I really appreciated. I learned a lot from making those films, and I'm still extremely grateful to all the people I worked with on them, and because I approached them kind of like animation, and I used to meticulously storyboard everything, and so it was all plotted out. And if you've ever made any films, you know how difficult it is to realize your plans. And with that film, I had, I'd drawn what I thought were very beautifully detailed storyboards for everything, and I shot it pretty much faithfully to the storyboard, and then I put it all together. And I'm proud of all the work I put into the film, but I also realized that dramatically it doesn't really work very well. And it's interesting to realize when something hasn't worked, because usually you can go, oh yeah, but we got rained off that day, and so that's the reason we didn't get that shot. Or yeah, oh, but if I just had the budget for a crane, then I could have ended it the way I wanted to end. You can invent a million excuses for why it didn't work. But when you achieve pretty much what you intended, and then you watch the film you intended to make and you realize, oh, it still doesn't really work, it's a bit more painful because you realize, oh, that was me. I did that. There isn't a dramatic through line that pulls people along. What I'm doing is I'm telling a fairy tale, and fairy tales are not structurally particularly dramatic stories because it's just one thing after another. But it's one thing after another, full of magic and color, which is wonderful. But you have a limited attention span for that, and the longer something lasts, the more likely we are to need some kind of dramatic tension, like, are they going to achieve X or Y, or what is bad person planning to do, and is that going to affect protagonist? And my stories didn't have any of those kind of questions in at that time, because I was just interested in creating sort of images and ideas and then dishing them out one by one to the viewer, and the viewers in turn were not very interested. In spite of it being quite attractive in places, and the ideas being, I think, quite good.
But at least you did it. I mean, that's the one thing, is like just getting something done is the hardest thing I've found that people struggle through, because they see it on TV, they see it's easy, they think it's easy, and then when they really have to put the work, time, and all that stuff in, then it's like, oh man, years go by. You're like,
yes, and you don't learn how to do things by waiting until you're ready to do them.
Right.
It helps to try and fail, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. Well, and there are degrees of failure, aren't there? You can, like I say, you can achieve everything you were trying to achieve and still realize that in some ways you've failed. And that's horrible, but kind of constructive. It's useful.
So I went to England like a long time ago, and the first thing I found was this, and I thought, and it said Mr. Blobby, and I'm like, what is Mr. Blobby? What is that?
The gist of it? Okay. Yeah. So the lore of Blobby is very hard to get your head around.
Yeah.
In the 90s, there was a Saturday evening family entertainment show called Noel's House Party, and they had a sort of a candid camera section where they would set up pranks on celebrities, and one of those pranks was the whole concept was there's a fake kids show where everything would go wrong, and the character that fake show was built around was Mr. Blobby. So Mr. Blobby was conceived as a spoof of sort of kids show mascots like Barney the dinosaur, that sort of thing. So he's intentionally grotesque and revolting, and his main characteristic is that he's incredibly clumsy and violent. He shrieks in a sort of robot-like voice with a weird synthesizer effect on it. He only says the word Blobby, and he smashes everything up. And somehow Mr. Blobby has gone from being a spoof of a beloved children's character to becoming a real children's character. Somehow he's leapt through the sort of the postmodern portal and become quite a popular figure on his own. Now, mostly popular, ironically, among people of my generation.
Right, right.
You do still see him making appearances here and there.
So after you left film school, you got into comedy and started doing the comedy circuit there, and
so I was living in London, and which has during the pandemic, who's to say if any such thing as a comedy scene exists. But London has a pretty decent comedy scene, and it's very easy to get stage time, and it couldn't be more different from trying to make little short films ripping off Tim Burton and Terry Gilliam and the Quay brothers, or whoever I was ripping off at the time. Sitting in a tiny little darkened garret trying to construct things, which is what I'm doing now. Stand-up is about going out and talking to an audience for 5 minutes. And as I ramble on here, what I'm about to say is going to be quite ironic, but doing stand-up gives you a sense of an audience's patience, which is something that would have been useful when I was making those short films years earlier. It gives you a feeling for what information do people need in order to enjoy this. Because is in joke terms that's the setup, but in film terms that's the exposition. What do we need to know about this character to make this whatever struggle they're trying to go through interesting? And I suppose in animation terms and in visual terms, you have the same issue, which is what is going to make this scene read clearly? How do I avoid lines that intersect weakly in a way that isn't striking? How do I avoid the characters having the same outline so that they're sort of blending into each other? How do I avoid them sounding like each other? These sorts of things. What does the audience need just to be able to just watch it and enjoy it?
Do you have a couple other things? You have a podcast called The Loremen. I've been listening to that. It's still, I'm amazed how you got so many stories. I mean, there's lots of stuff in there.
Yeah, so we've been doing it for a few years, and we've done an episode, almost an episode a week, or maybe 3 episodes a month during COVID, which a massive increase, because we used to do about 8 to 10 episodes a year for the first couple of years, so we were very, very, very slow, and we got much, much faster. And the reason we have lots of stories is that we're talking about local folklore, and it's everywhere. It's not everywhere in America. So we don't do so many episodes about America. But you can't throw a stone in an English village or on a Scottish hill without hitting a rock that was supposedly a witch that was turned to stone by the devil after she lost a bet with a local landowner. Everything is full of nonsensical stories, and the nice thing about them is that they're unlike the big ones like Robin Hood or Loch Ness. They've never had the Hollywood treatment, so nobody's worked out all the plot holes in them and fixed them and polished off the rough edges. So the stories will have like Chekhov's gun moments where something that's obviously important will be established 3 times at the start of the story and then never come back into it, because it doesn't matter, because no brilliant script editor has ever gone through any of these. They're just proper folk stories. And so they're full of things that we find very funny to when they work, that's great. And when they don't work, we also really enjoy that.
Yeah, and the recent one you were showing different baby Jesus, like from the art like from a long time ago, and how the artists made them just very bizarre,
very ugly.
Yeah.
We are not the first people to notice that baby Jesuses used to be very ugly in historical paintings. But yes, well, that was one of for a live stream. We did we shared a little extra that we made for last Christmas, I think, where James Shakeshaft, my co-host, and I looked through some of the ugliest Jesuses. I think there was a deliberate attempt to make Jesus not look like a child, because of course he was not a human, so he was already,
Right.
the idea was he's already sort of an adult, so they would draw him with an adult face on a baby's body, and the effect is grotesque a lot
Mhm.
of the time. Or they would, so he looks like a little awful, angry goblin in so many
Yeah.
of these pictures. They're
I th-
really fantastic.
yeah, if anybody sees that, it's really go to that. It's incredibly, your examples you show are like really wow. They're really interesting to see. But also you also made a video game that I saw that you were kind of pushing, and then is it still going on, or
Yes,
it's like
well, I think I was plugging it a little bit
mhm.
because it was on sale, but also because suddenly in the last year I developed loads more Twitter followers and YouTube subscribers, and the publishers emailed me to sort of say, "Hey, maybe they would like to buy this product you made and we published several years ago." And so I thought, well, probably not, and did a little post about it. And it turns out that, yeah, actually, that was a pretty decent month. People did want to buy the game that they didn't know that I'd made. I've always been a huge fan of point and click adventure games, so I made and animated a couple of small ones of my own in the style of Monkey Island, I suppose, just ripping off Monkey Island, but with more of a maybe a British sensibility or my sense of humor. I don't know. Um, and so I drew a lot of backgrounds and I animated a lot of characters in a way that I would never do again. So many. The games are still for sale, and I strongly recommend them. If you like point and clicks, please buy it. They're called Nelly Cootalot Spoonbigs Ahoy and Nelly Cootalot The Foul Fleet. But I did 3D characters with a cell shading effect to make them look like 2D characters, which I thought would save time in animating them, because then I can reuse them for like cutscenes, and I can film them from a million different angles. And it is the stupidest decision I or anyone else has ever made, because yes, it saves time when you've got to animate a character walking in 8 different directions for them to be a 3D model, because you only have to do the walk cycle once. But it massively increases at time when you have a cast of 30 characters who never walk, who also have to be created in 3D in order to render them, making them look like a 2D drawing you could have done in a fraction of that time. And also, you can always tell, I think, when something is cell shaded 3D, and it can look pretty nice, but it's never quite, at least when you do it as well as I did it, it's just never quite as satisfying as it would be if it were just a drawing. So I learned a lot of painful lessons there, even though I think the end product is something that I'm very pleased with, and if you play it, is a pleasantly surprising game.
Yeah, I saw your video about you were talking to a small group of people and showing the game,
Oh,
and yeah.
that's a very old video from there's that little room talking about adventure games. I now help organize that as a somewhat bigger event. So, COVID aside, for the last few years before that, we would go to a nice auditorium at the British Library and get people who write narrative games to come and talk about their games, and people who are making indie games to come and show off their games. The event's called Adventure X, and purely because I've been helping to organize that, purely because I like narrative games, and occasionally work doing writing and animation on them. And that's been a very fun thing to do. So I've got to meet and talk to childhood heroes who, if you're not into it, point and clicks, you won't know who they are. But if you are, you will. And that's a really fun thing. I like, I'm aware that the advice is always to, I think Mark Twain said, put all your eggs in one basket and then watch that basket. Don't divide your interests. Find something you care about and then focus on it. And I have decidedly never done that. So I dabbled in video games, and I do stand-up comedy, and I went to film school. And I don't know, I sort of feel like only doing things that I'm interested in as well as I can and seeing what works. It hasn't made me loads of money, but I have enjoyed it.
I did notice you had something called Mystery at the Poe House.
I did a murder mystery on Twitter. which you can find archived on my YouTube. And that was interactive, and people could choose mostly inconsequential things and then vote about who they thought did it. And sort of off the back of that, Poe House in Baltimore, which is one of the places Edgar Allan Poe lived, and it's a museum. They had turned their annual Edgar Allan Poe Day into an online event, and so they commissioned me to make a series of videos. So there's a series of videos where the ghost of Edgar Allan Poe poses a riddle that you can solve. So you can find them on their Twitter. Because it was for them, I haven't archived it to YouTube. So it is a bit of ABK ephemera. So well done for digging that up. But I think it was quite funny, and I used quite bad deep fakery to face track my face and then manipulate a picture of Edgar Allan Poe.
It is I, the ghost of Edgar Allan Poe.
Is that the accent you're going with?
Maybe.
You sound like Dr. Evil.
That is not important.
So Edgar Allan Poe, I have a weird sort of ghost puppet of Edgar Allan Poe talking while I do a bad impersonation of Orson Welles that keeps sliding towards Dr. Evil as I talk, as Edgar Allan Poe's voice.
Yeah, I thought that was really well done. I mean, the way his head and his eyes blinked and he looked around, and yeah.
It isn't animation, it is AI doing it, but it's very interesting to see how quickly people are going to be put out of business in VFX through neural networks learning how to create things that fool the eye.
So I noticed you put out something called the playing Dungeons Dragons with an actual dragon.
If you haven't seen the sketch, it's me and a couple of other me's in different hats playing people playing a game of Dungeons Dragons. And yeah, so the dragon's animated in Blender, like most of the animation I'm doing at the moment. So that was fun. So I haven't done much 3D with lip sync. So I got to build a rig for doing the mouth. And then I did another video at Christmas where I was spoofing Tim Burton's animation style. So I got to try and do that. Try to imitate the head replacement style of animation that they'd use in that Henry Selick used in Nightmare Before Christmas or James and the Giant Peach. Interesting because you have to fight against the way computer animation wants to work, because it wants you to add things like motion blur and smooth interpolations, and just trying to go, okay, no, so we're going to do it at 12 frames a second and make it a bit jerky on purpose and make sure that there are no smooth transitions between there's no morphing between the mouth shapes. They're just going to click in and out, and it's going to be nice and punchy. And I was surprised at how nicely it's not a perfect imitation, but it does have the vibe of stop motion, I think.
So what advice would you have for I guess YouTubers or just animation students in general?
Yeah, you teach animation. I wouldn't presume to teach anybody anything about animation, but I have enjoyed doing pixel animation and 3D animation and traditional 2D, and I've done a bit of stop motion for some of those films back in the day with no jokes. And doing things you're interested in and getting them finished and then doing something else is the only thing I can recommend, because it's very satisfying to finish something, even if you've made mistakes and you learn from it. Planning things and never doing them, I spent a long time doing that, and it's not nearly as good as just making it on whatever scale you can, with whatever equipment you can get your hands on, whatever facilities you can make. I'm aware that I'm luckier than some people in that I've got a corner of a room that I can use. It's not big. I don't have a studio or anything like that. But even having a corner of a room is more than some people have. And to make videos, you do need things. But the price drops in technology do mean that it's more accessible than it was when I was a kid, when you were a kid, where having an 8mm camera or a 16mm camera at home, people didn't have that. I didn't have anything like that growing up. The fact that you can do it on your phone, if you've got a phone, is quite exciting.
I want to thank you for coming on Animateducated and starting off the new year, talking to us. And
thank you for having me. I think I've probably made your viewers less educated, but I can only apologize.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. We'll find out. But yeah, and if you want to have any of your subscribers, come over, if they're not doing
Well,
anything.
I'll let them know, but I don't control them. They are their own
Yeah.
people. But yes, let me know when this is ready, and I'll do a little post about it.
Okay, great. All right, good. Yeah. So, and I'd love to talk to you more and find out, what else you're doing in the new year and all that. But you need to go and make some more stuff. So
I do. I've got to go and make more things. Just got to
Yeah.
keep feeding the content mill, haven't we?
All right. Well, thanks again. I'll see you. Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So I hope you enjoyed that interview with Alasdair Beckett-King. And if you did, and you want to help this channel grow a little, if you'd like to see more interviews, you can scroll down on this channel. You'll see a whole bunch of interviews down there past all the other stuff I've posted recently. Just push that button right there. There it is right there. And that should help. And also, here's a video. This one is pretty good. And this is not bad either. So check these out. And we'll see you next time on Animated Educated.